Micro resorts are a really popular thing to talk about right now. And there's a lot of YouTube videos that are getting a bunch of press and a bunch of views. And you know, people are saying, oh, they spent $400,000 and the micro resort's now worth $3.5 million or something like that. And you know, they're using cap rates and things like that, and just telling you that it's basically easy to take $400,000 or $500,000 and turn it into $500,000. What they don't show you though is what happens when you get $300,000 in added expense, or what happens when your occupancy isn't exactly what you think it's going to be. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to, talk about micro resorts and give you the red flags that you're going to have to avoid at all cost if you actually want to make this, a method that you use to make money. All right, my name's Chris. I'm a real estate broker outside of Austin, Texas. And the reason I do videos like this is when people start having these dreams, they need somebody who actually can talk to them from experience, point out some of the pitfalls that they need to avoid. And then when it comes time to buy that piece of property, you seek out somebody like myself instead of just some random realtor that you find on Zillow to help you out with that transaction. Now, the first thing I want to talk about with this, and again, I mentioned these other YouTube videos, so I want to talk about what they actually got right. The things that you're seeing on there that are, yes, facts. There's no hiding it. There's no kind of shading in around the lines. These are the things that are right. And as I get started in this, if you see this little dog running around, that's my Charlie girl. So not a wild dingo that's going to eat me. But anyway, what did they get right? Well, the first thing is location synergy. The most popular resorts, these micro resorts, aren't in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, I know there are some that are in the middle of nowhere and they're killing it, and they've got the Instagram presence and all this other stuff and TikTok, and man, people are just flocking there, and you see those stories. But that's not the majority of them. The majority of them are very well situated, maybe within about an hour of a major metro area. They're tucked in near vineyards or near little small hill country towns with boutiques and things like that, maybe near breweries and distilleries, near wedding venues. So there's a lot to be said about location synergy and having something in a location that people are actually looking to go to that location to stay. And when you have that built-in demand because of everything that's around or within a 15 or a 20-minute drive of the micro resort, that's where you're going to be able to charge your $300, $350, maybe $400 a night for something like a yurt, right? Nobody thinks about a yurt and go, well, why? Hell, I've looked at it myself, and I'm going, I would never stay in a yurt for $400 a night. But if it was somewhere that I wanted to be or needed to be for a very specific reason, and that was my option, okay, I can see the romantic side of that, so it may be worthwhile. So again, location synergy, really, really big thing. That's one of the things that these micro resorts that you're seeing online are getting right. Another thing that makes these possible, and this is a place that I know outside of Austin, Texas, that does this as well, and you can get the whole property booked. In fact, they only open up bookings for individual cabins and yurts as you get closer to the date. If you're looking for like a year out, even 8 months out, you have to book the entire property. And how do you do that? Well, you pay them $4,000 a night. And when you can book this place out for $4,000 a night, all you need is one weekend a month to make a pretty nice paycheck. And if you can get 2 weekends a month, especially in the busy seasons, on the shoulder seasons when people are out at wineries or, wedding season, stuff like that, if you can get 2 weddings a month, maybe even 3, okay, that's when that revenue starts to roll in. So that's one of the other things that a lot of these larger properties do. And again, they're micro resorts because there's multiple places that you can rent out on each one. Okay, if you can get that whole place booked up in one fell swoop for a few nights each month, okay, now you're on to something. The third thing that they get right is that for the most part, they're going to be on flat buildable land. One of the things that changes numbers more than anything is having increased cost to build whatever it is that you're building. So if you're having to add additional septic systems, maybe because the cabins are too spread out, or you're having to put in multiple wells, or if you're having to build on the side of a mountain and your foundation costs go way up, okay, when you watch these other videos and you're like, how are they building these things for $150,000 each or $100,000 each? Well, it's a nice flat lot, and all they're having to do is go put a small little pad out there and then build on top of it. They're not having to build stem walls. They're not having to do, large pier and beam foundations and stuff like that. So if you want to keep those costs down, look for flat buildable sites. The fourth thing about a lot of these is they're building very simple structures. Yurts, I think you can get yurts for around $10,000, and maybe even cheaper if it's a smaller one, and then you're just putting up a little wooden platform to drop your yurt on top of. Okay, it's not very expensive if you have a good well or municipal water supply to run water lines underground, so that's fairly cheap. Prefab tiny homes, right? The reason tiny homes are attractive right now is because they're dirt cheap as opposed to building a site-built cabin. You can get a tiny home for $25,000, maybe $30,000, but if you get a contractor to come out and build cabins on site, that number's going to probably double. So one of the things that you see with the most successful ones of these is that they're using cheap, I shouldn't say cheap, I should say they're using affordable structures that can be repeated over and over. If you go and buy a tiny home, if you buy one and it costs you $30,000, if you tell that company, hey, I'm going to buy 10 of these, you probably can get that number down to $25,000. You're buying in mass. So that's how they're doing these more successfully. And then the last thing that they're doing really well is they've got very, very well-versed CPAs using bonus depreciation and things like that to make sure that that tax strategy is just on point from the very beginning. These aren't rookies that are doing their taxes on their own and using, QuickBooks or something like that, and then, going onto the IRS website and doing the stuff on their own. Okay, they are paying attorneys, they are paying CPAs to make sure that their taxes are taking the maximum amount that they possibly can extract from this in order to maximize how much revenue they're getting, on their returns. So if you don't have those people in place up front, you need to get them before you even start going down this road, because a really good CPA who's got experience in these endeavors like this can make you a lot more money than you're going to be able to make on your own. So knowing that that's what the people that are doing it successfully are getting right, the key is make sure that you're doing those things and then avoiding a few things as well. Now, the first thing that you've got to watch out for, and again, other YouTube videos, you got to learn how to spot the BS, right? So are you sure what they're telling you on there includes the land, or was the land purchased before and they're not including that? Because there's a big difference between building 4 $100,000 structures and saying you're into the property $400,000, and then just kind of omitting the fact that you've also spent $400,000 on the land. So you're actually $800,000 in. Okay, that doesn't make as good a headlines, which is why they omit that. The other thing is, okay, what about the fact that one of them is not talking about the $500,000 plus that they put into the coffee shop on the property? They're saying, oh, we spent $500,000 on this property. No, you didn't. You spent $1 million. Now, if you can spend $1 million and get a $2.5 million return, that's still a great return, but that doesn't change the fact that these YouTube videos are BS, and the headlines that they're having and the thumbnails are just BS trying to get you to watch their video because they make a lot of money off of video views, right? So understand when you're watching these videos, they're inflating their values. They're not telling you about the land that they had to buy or the coffee shop that was built on site that they're omitting from you. Make sure you can spot the BS. Another thing in inflated values is they don't really address infrastructure costs. Yeah, you can spend $100,000 on a cabin. That's fine. What about the $50,000 for that driveway on that 10 acres to get back to the cabins and the pad site there? What about the $15,000 or $20,000 you're having to spend on a well, and then all the infrastructure for the well and the piping to get everything there? What about the $10,000 electric extension that you had to pay to get your line drop in, and the additional cost because you're not just running 150 or 200 amp service, you actually have to get maybe 400 amp service to service all the air conditioning there. Okay, you can end up with an extra $150,000 in hard cost and infrastructure costs before you ever start building a cabin, but none of these videos ever tell you about that, so make sure you're factoring that in. The next thing to keep an eye on, another red flag, is zoning oversights. very few properties, especially in these areas where these things are popular, very few properties are completely unzoned or unrestricted. Most counties now are including certain types of zoning, and if you want to put in a micro resort, you're going to have to get a motel hotel zoning approved for that property, at least in most locations. And the other thing that you've got to check on, again, if you like yurts and you've stayed in something like that, or fabric tents, whatever, make sure that that county actually allows you to build them. I know that there's certain locations around the U.S. that you are not allowed to put those in as a motel hotel zoning. So, think about it this way. Those things are made out of cotton. If you put them in the middle of an area that's at high fire risk, do you think the county is going to be okay with you putting those things in? Make sure you understand what you want to do at the end. What does your final product look like? And then go to the county and make sure you can actually do it. And then the other thing you've really got to pay attention to is market timing and competition, right? I own a couple of short-term rentals on my own. I can tell you that over the last 2 years, the revenues have gone down immensely. And that's for a few reasons. One, fewer people are traveling and staying in short-term rentals. Two, the competition is still there. So if you decrease demand but the competition stays high, okay, everybody's going to have to start dropping their prices, trying to find where the buyers are willing to spend, or you're going to have to increase your capital expenditures to put cooler things on the property to actually get people there. So make sure you understand the competition aspect, and then market timing also. It might be too late in some areas to actually execute on this. Take the Texas Hill Country, for example. Prices out here have doubled or more in the last few years. Fredericksburg is a highly sought after area. There's a lot of really cool stuff out there, but the values in Fredericksburg have gone up 45% in the last 3 years. So market timing may just be off, and we may need a massive correction that'll never come to make the viability of a micro resort actually makes sense. Or you may need a lot larger property with a lot more units than just 4, 5, or 6 units to make sense economically. Again, it's the idea that the more land you buy, the less that cost per acre is, and that price goes down. So maybe you're just going to have to put a lot more units in place to make it make sense. But regardless, competition and market timing are really, really important things to watch out for, and major red flags that you need to be aware of. Now, that last piece was just a little bit kind of high level. Let's dig into hidden costs here, because if you don't really have an understanding of what the costs of these things are, you can get quite a bit of a shock if you've got a property under contract already and you go and start pricing these things. Now, what I'm going to give you is my perspective, things that I'm seeing here on the ground in Central Texas, but in other states it could and very well will be different. Now, if you're trying to do this, like I said, in Central Texas, I got you covered. Even if it's not in an area that I work, I've got enough agents that I know, and contractors and lenders and stuff like that can get you taken care of. If it's in another state, though, you can still reach out to me. Chances are I know a realtor or a contractor or somebody in the area that you're looking. I can put you in contact with them. I can still give you a trustworthy resource, somebody who's done this before. One of the tough things is if you just go online and you find somebody like, hey, I specialize in land sales. Well, they may have done one land sale in the last 3 or 4 years and they didn't do any development on it. It was just somebody who wanted to put cattle out there. That's a lot different than trying to do something like we're talking about in this video. So if you need help in Texas or outside, reach out. I can probably put you in contact with somebody that's competent. Now, let's jump into the actual numbers. Septic systems. Depending on how many units you're going to want to put on a septic system, and this is, again, assuming you're looking in rural areas and there's not municipal sewer or municipal sewer. I'll get it figured out. But septic systems are sized by the number of bedrooms. So if you're doing 5 one-bedroom units and you want to put all of them on one septic system, okay, you're going to need a septic system that's sized for 5 bedrooms. I would always say build in some overflow, some buffer. That way, maybe you want to add another couple of units down the road. Okay, give yourself the ability to do that, not that you have to go in and add another septic system from the beginning. Septic systems in this area are going to start somewhere in the $15,000 to $20,000 range, and that would be kind of for a 4-bedroom type thing. And as you go up, that number is going to go up. I've seen septic systems that are $35,000 and $40,000 if you're wanting to max out the size, depending on what else is on there. Do you have washer dryer? Do you have laundry facilities? Do you have stuff like that? So you're really going to have to work with somebody who's knowledgeable that installs these things. You may be able to get a permit that's not overly burdensome for up to 5,000 gallons a day, but outside of that, if you're going to put a bunch of units on one, and you're going to go over 5,000 gallons, you're talking commercial quality, and you're talking 100,000 plus, more than likely $150,000 for that septic unit. That's a lot of information to tell you. Know what you want to do up front, and know that, okay, if you're staying in that 4 to 5 bedroom, even up to about 7, if you're staying in that range, you can probably get it taken care of with kind of a normal single family septic. If you're going beyond that, you're probably going to start getting into the territory of commercial, and that gets really expensive. Now, the second part of that is wells. Wells are also expensive, and again, if you're staying in that 4, 5, 6 unit range, you can probably get by with a normal municipal well. Again, your local regulations are going to tell you. But if you want to have more units, you may have to have a larger well. You may have to put in a commercial well. And again, in Texas, you would get that approved by TCEQ. But it just depends on how big you want to go. Now, you're going to have a certain size of well, and it's going to produce a certain gallons per minute. That's how wells are rated. If you're producing 10, 15, 20 gallons a minute, that's a pretty good well in most parts of Texas. And you're going to be able to get by with that, again, for those few units if you're doing a micro resort. If you're only getting 2, 3, or 4 gallons a minute, you're going to have to talk to that well company. Maybe you're going to have to put in a 15 or 20,000 gallon storage tank, and you'll pump water into that storage tank, and then have to have another well or another pump to pump from that storage tank to your units. That's going to add additional cost. I can tell you here in Central Texas, if you're going to go about 800 feet down, you're more than likely going to be in the $25,000 to $30,000 for a well. That's not counting the additional tanks and infrastructure and filters and things like that also. So if you're going to be $20,000 or $30,000 in on a septic system, and you're going to be $30,000 in on a well, all right, we got 2 utilities in place, and you're already $50,000 on top of your land cost and your construction cost. Okay, so what's next? Electricity. You can get, if electricity is close to your drop, you might be able to get by with a couple of $1,000, $3,000 for an electrical drop, depending on how much electricity you need. And again, that goes back to the number of units that you're doing. You're going to have to talk to your electric company to figure that out. Here in Central Texas, for the most part, rural areas are going to be Pedernales Electric Company. And I know that I can call them up and I can say, hey, this is what I want to do. How much electric am I going to need? And they'll tell me, and I'll say, hey, it looks like the drop is going to be 1,000 feet away from your line. And they're going to say, okay, we're going to send out a crew and we'll give you an estimate on this. If it's 1,000 feet away, you're probably going to be in the neighborhood of $10,000 just to get that electric run, or even more, depending on, again, how much electricity you need. So now with water, sewer, septic, and that electric line, you might be 60,000 or more in. What else do you need? Well, you need driveways. Do you have to, does the county that you're putting this in, whatever state you're putting it in, is this going to be considered a hotel or a motel? Because some of them do classify micro resorts just like that. Okay, if they classify them like that, you're going to have to put in an approved driveway for fire and EMS access. All right, this is not just a gravel road that you can drive out through the pasture and do that with. If you're doing approved driveways, they're going to more than likely have to support tanker trucks, which means they've got a giant water tank on the back because you're not close to fire hydrants and stuff like that. And if they have to support those trucks, you're going to have to pass a specific PSI rating on your road. That means you're not just going to go out there with road base and pile up road base and compress it. You're going to have to do maybe geotextiles underneath or things like that. You may have to put asphalt or concrete over the top of it. Talk about an expense. Asphalt at this point, you're more than likely going to be in the range of about $5 to $6 per square foot in order to support that pumper truck. If you're going to do concrete, you're probably going to be between $11 and $15 a square foot. So if you're looking at $11 to $15 a square foot, let's call it 15, that's easier for my math, and you need a 12-foot wide, man, let's do 12, let's do $12 a foot, and you need a 12-foot wide road for these trucks, okay, that's $144 per linear foot. And if it's 1,000 feet long, okay, 144 per linear foot, 1,000 feet long, it's $144,000 for your driveway. This is why it's important to make sure you understand the cost of these things up front, because this can get really, really shocking. And then beyond that, okay, now we've got hard costs taken care of. We got utilities, we can get to the site and everything like that. All right, now what about soft costs? What about engineering? What about permits, and how long is that going to take you? If your permitting can take you, 6 or 7 months, you've got holding costs for all that time. And then once you get your utilities in, if you have to go back for additional permitting or, get people signed off on, well, now you've got all of that infrastructure in place, and you've got additional holding costs while you're waiting for your final approvals. Maybe that's 2 or 3 more months. If you're getting a loan for construction, if you're paying cash, okay, your holding costs are your holding costs, you're just cash out, right? But if you're getting a construction loan, every time you take a draw from the bank, you're going to pay additional money, right? It's typically going to be interest only on what you've drawn out. But if you've paid for all of this stuff and you're out $200,000 or $300,000 in addition to the land cost of, call it $200,000 or $300,000, okay, you're $400,000 to $600,000 out that you're paying interest on, and that interest right now is probably going to be about 7.5% to 8%. That's a hell of a carrying cost every month, and it's recurring over and over and over. And if you don't get that construction complete in the first 12 to 18 months, depending on the bank, you're going to have to go back and refi it after that. And likely it's going to be at a little bit of a higher rate, unless we're in a declining environment like we kind of are now, but it's fairly stable. Anyway, what I'm saying is your carrying costs are going to be pretty high because you're paying interest on a lot of money that's been laid out up front. So again, understand this before you start this process. And now I'm going to dive in a little bit more on my personal experience with short-term rentals. Okay, the things that nobody really tells you about. You might be able to find these on subreddits and things like that, but there are massive headaches. The first one I'm going to talk about is insurance. So mine are in Colorado. Our insurance has more than doubled on both of our properties in the last 2.5 years because of wildfire risk. There was a wildfire that burned about 900 acres, mostly of grass, about 5 miles away from one of our places. Okay, well, now all of a sudden we're in an elevated wildfire risk, so the insurance is going up. One of the other things that insurance is trying to do is they don't want to insure this anymore, regardless of what we pay for it. So what insurance companies are doing now is they're saying, hey, we're going to send out inspectors to your property, and we're going to let you know what you need to do in order to renew your policy. So we had an inspector go out, and they're taking a look at our property, and they're taking pictures, and they're sending us these pictures, and they're like, you've got to do all of this stuff. You've got to get all vegetation away from the house. Your wooden deck has to be completely surrounded by a very specific fire screen, and you can't have any trees that are close to this. And that bush over there, that bush has got to be taken out. That bush wasn't even on our property, but they wanted me to take it out. It was my neighbor's bush. How the hell am I going to go cut down my neighbor's bush? But they wanted us to do all of these things just so they would renew our policy. I kind of started adding, and there was a shed that we had. It was a storage shed about 20 feet away from the house. They wanted me to tear down my storage shed. I kid you not. I started adding it all up. It was going to cost me about $15,000 to $20,000 to do all of the work that they wanted us to do just to renew our policy. And I asked the lady, I said, okay, if we do all of this stuff, are you going to then take my premium down? Because at this point, my house isn't going to burn down. Like, the likelihood is next to zero if I do all of the stuff that you want me to do. And she said, no, your premium won't go down. That's just for the right for us to renew your policy. Insurance is becoming a major issue. Make sure you are talking to an insurance broker up front about what your plans are. And if you're going to be putting in multiple units, this is going to be more than likely a commercial policy. So you're probably not just going to go talk to your Allstate rep. You need a broker, by the way. Don't go directly to Allstate or anybody else. If you need a broker, let me know. I've got a broker that writes in like 15 states. In the states she doesn't write in, she has other people that she knows out there. But also you need a commercial broker, which that's what her husband is. So again, call me if you need these people. So insurance is the first one from an operational standpoint. These costs are going to continue to escalate as you go. All right. The second one, and again, from experience, cleaning crew, maintenance crew, those type of people. And yes, even if you hire a great management company to take care of it, they can never get it right. The cleaning crews, we're always having to tell them, hey, go get rid of the weeds. The maintenance, yard maintenance is terrible. Guys, this wasn't, this stuff isn't clean, because they put pictures in it for us to see. But there's always headaches with that. Maintenance is never on time. There's always stuff that they never quite get right. And it's a major headache. Now, does it cost me any more money? No, not really. Obviously, we're paying the management company to take care of this for us, but it's never done like if I would do it. And you've got to be okay with that if you're going to pay somebody else to do it. If it needs to be something that you would do, either A, you need to live on site, or B, you need to directly manage the cleaners, the maintenance, the laundry facilities, all of that stuff needs to be managed by you. Because if it's not, it's going to be a constant headache. Things that are also constant headaches is guest risks. You always have, we were in the mountains, we had fire pits, right? We got rid of the fire pits because you never know if a guest is going to be a dumbass and pile all the wood into the fire pit and burn it all, the last night bonfire, right? We all love those. We constantly had our neighbors, and that's the other risk that I want to talk about is your neighbors. We constantly had our neighbors texting us, and I'm trying to be a responsible owner up there, and I want my neighbors, like I'm telling them, look, call me if you've got issues. I want to be your point of contact. And our neighbors are sending pictures of the fires that our guests have in these fire pits, like they're going to burn down the whole damn county. And they're right. So, we had to get rid of the fire pits. We brought out propane fire pits, which adds another level of headache because you've got to keep propane bottles on site. And propane bottle, to change them out, it's $25 up there. And you never know if somebody's going to leave the damn propane tank on all night and run your bottles out. So, again, constant source of concern. We have decks on ours, and the decks are built to code, they're built to specification, but you never know when some moron is going to get drunk and climb up on top of the handrail and fall off and break a neck. So you're going to have additional insurance. You're going to have umbrella policies on top of your personal belongings. And when you get insurance on your short-term rental stuff, make sure that they know it is a short-term rental policy. You can get cool add-ons, like if somebody burns your house down, you can get lost rent, and that's good. But they need to know that it's a short-term rental policy just to make sure that, if something does happen, then the insurance company can't come back and say, oh, wait, you didn't tell us it was a short-term rental. You just said it was a rental, and long-term rentals are different for us. We're not going to cover any of your crap. So you've got to be completely upfront with your insurance companies. And again, another constant source of headache. I mentioned neighbors a little bit also, right? Our neighbors have been really good. Like they reach out to us and they communicate with us, and we try to keep them happy. And that's just something that we try to do. But I've heard horror stories about neighbors. Every short-term rental at this point has got cameras all the way around. And there are short-term renters that I've talked to that their neighbors are always calling in false complaints. They've had false complaints called into the county when they didn't even have people at the house. So you want to get your property spread out from neighbors. That's the best thing, right? Because noise travels, especially at night. So you want to get as far away from neighbors as humanly possible, but that's not always possible. So you try to, go talk to your neighbors ahead of time. Let them know. We told our neighbors from the beginning, we're doing a short-term rental. If there is any problems, call us. I don't care when it is. Call us or text us. We want to stay on top of it. But again, not all rentals are good with that. Or not all neighbors are good with that. So it's kind of hit or miss. The other thing is counties in general. One of the counties, if you've heard about Breckenridge, Colorado, beautiful place, Summit County. Summit County cut the number of short-term rental permits by about 60%, and they said it's because their workforce couldn't afford to live there because everything was short-term rentals. Well, overnight, about 8,000 short-term rental owners were going, shit, now what? And if that much product hits the market at one time in a real estate market, now you have a flooded market and everybody's lowering their prices to try to get their property sold fastest. So their values just plummeted. So the county can absolutely hose you on your dreams for this. Make sure you understand, is there any current conversations in the county about limiting short-term rentals, or how are they going to limit those? My best advice would be just assume that at some point the counties are going to limit them and require you to pay additional taxes and require you to get yearly permits, which is going to cost you additional money, which is going to add more headache. It's going to add more overlays, and it's going to add more holding costs for the properties, right? So just assume that that's going to happen in the future, even if it's not happening right now. And then the last one, we should know about seasonality, right? If you're in a ski market, okay, your ski season is going to be great. It may not be as good in the other markets. If you're in the Texas Hill Country, the summers aren't going to be as good. You're still going to get people traveling for the summer, but it's hot, and most people don't come to Texas to vacation in the summer unless they have to. So your high seasons are going to kind of be that fall and that spring season, and winter, and that's when most people get married too. So if you're looking at a wedding venue area, make sure you understand when most of the weddings are taking place. Outside of that, you're going to have to plan for downtimes. You're going to adjust your rates down if you're going to want to keep your cleaning staff employed. If you don't worry about keeping your cleaning staff employed, maybe that's the time that you're going to travel there and utilize it for yourself. But understand that seasonality is a real thing, and the numbers drop in the off season, for your revenue. So I'm going to give you a few tips after all of that, and hopefully you're getting something out of this. The first thing that I would do if I was buying one of these, and personally I am looking for land to do just this, the first thing that you should look for is demand. Find markets that have good demand and don't have too much competition. Now, if you can get around it a little bit if you build something that doesn't currently exist, but you're going to do like I do. You're going to be constantly on Airbnb and Vrbo and Booking.com. You're going to constantly be analyzing properties. You're going to look, what do they have? Okay, where's the holes in the market? And some of your local management companies can help you with that. But start with the demand and what you can build there that will actually create demand. After that, you can go find the land. You can go identify how much land you need. You can talk to the county, find out what's zoned, what's not, but always start with the demand first. The second thing is always budget conservatively on occupancy. People will talk about RevPAR, and that's how much revenue that you get per night booked. So make sure that when you're looking at how many nights you're expecting to book, do that conservatively. We started out with one of our places in Colorado was getting booked at about 98%, and now we're down to about 70%. So obviously that's a big hit to our bottom line. Now we're still okay because we were conservative with our numbers, but if you're looking at an area, and if you're looking on something like AirDNA or something like that, and it's telling you that area is booking 150 nights a year or 170 half a year, I would run my numbers at 40% of the year, or maybe even 35% of the year, and see that it'll break even. Break even means I don't have to sell my property at a loss just to make sure that I can, pay next month's rent on my home. So always run your occupancy numbers conservatively. The third thing is over budget on infrastructure, and I already told you, kind of a range of what things cost. Now, if you had a good idea, or if you're like, yeah, in my area it doesn't cost that much, that's fine. Approximate what it'll cost in your area and then add 20% to that, or maybe even 25%. Always overestimate with infrastructure. You never know when you're going to hit a giant piece of ledgestone that it takes you, 3 times as long to put your septic tank in, or maybe you have to, maybe the well company, as good as they are, digs a dry hole, and it happens. If you talk to well diggers, they will tell you they will drill dry holes from time to time, and if they drill a dry hole, you're still paying for it. That's not on them. If you want them to go, 500 feet over and drill another hole, you're going to pay for a second hole. So always, for infrastructure and utility costs, always overestimate that. The next thing is always check your zoning multiple times. When you find that demand area, check your zoning. When you identify a piece of property, double check your zoning. When you get under contract, triple check your zoning. Have your plan in place and constantly be checking your zoning. It's the one thing that can end up screwing up your dreams and your plans more than anything, is if you think one thing, but it's actually something else. What you wanted to build is not going to happen. always double and triple check your zoning. The other quick one, and I mentioned this before, understand what you're doing for your operations. If you're hiring management companies, you better find 3 or 4 of them and interview them all and ask them all questions, and some of them are going to offer different things. If one of them says something that you're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that, go back to the other ones and ask them the same question and find out what their plan is. What are their contingency plans? Where do they rank in their star rankings on Airbnb and Vrbo and stuff like that? Where do they rank in compared to your competition there in that area? What are they going to do for cleaning? What are they going to do for laundry? Do they do off-site laundry? Do you have to have laundry on-site? Who's going to handle midnight calls? Some management companies expect the owner to take those things. Some management companies have maintenance teams that work around the clock. They're on for 8 hours, off for 8 hours, and they rotate through. So understand who's going to take those calls at midnight when the plumbing backs up, because it's going to back up. And the sixth one, and I probably should have put this number 2 right behind starting with demand, but understand what your exit strategy is. Are you trying to build this property, get as much interest and exposure as possible in the first year, and now you're going to try to sell it off for a profit after year 1? Do you have a 5-year plan? Do you have a 10-year plan? Or is this something that you're going to end up living there full time, and maybe it's 40 or 50 acres and you're going to have a bunch of other cabins that you can manage on your own, and that's your retirement plan? That's fine, but understand what your exit strategy is from the very beginning, and if the land does not align with that exit strategy, find a different piece of land. Because at the end of it all, I mean, building a micro resort seems like a freaking cool thing to do. I want to do it personally. I mean, I've got massive plans for what I want to do. And if you ever want to hear about them, call me. We'll go to coffee and we'll talk through, because, I love short-term rentals as an investment. I really, really love micro resorts. But if you're paying attention to the wrong people online, or if you're asking the wrong questions to people that you're looking for guidance, you can end up losing a lot of money. You can end up having a lot of frustration, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of sleepless nights. So you've got to start this thing off the right way. You've got to get the team of people around you that's going to help keep you out of trouble. And if you start talking to realtors or contractors or management companies, and they don't seem like they really have time to talk to you or answer questions up front, go find somebody else to talk to. Again, you can call me regardless if you need something in Texas or outside of Texas. I'll give you what I've learned, my expertise. I've got management companies that you can talk to that are more than happy to talk to you, and that's where you have to start. Because if you haven't done this before, or if you have done it before, maybe you have 1 or 2 short-term rentals, but now you're looking to expand that thing, you're not going to do it on your own. Very few people can do that without losing their ass. So have people that you can reach out to and figure this out with other people. They always say, don't make all your own mistakes, rely on other people's mistakes for your learning. That's what I'm encouraging you to do at this point.